My name is Madeline Brooks. I'm 32 years old. If you had asked me a year ago what kind of betrayal destroys a relationship, I would have named the obvious things first. Affairs. Lies. The kind of cheating people can point to later like a crime scene and say, there. That was the moment everything died. I know better now. Sometimes the beginning of the end doesn't arrive with lipstick on a collar or a stranger's text lighting up a phone screen. Sometimes it arrives in a calm voice from the other end of the couch, while the TV hums in the background and the person you love says something so casually outrageous that for a second your brain refuses to process the words. That Sunday in January, the heat had been running all day and the windows still looked cold. I remember that detail because I kept staring at the glass after he said it, like maybe the reflection would explain why my chest suddenly felt tight. Evan had one leg tucked under him, scrolling his phone with that absent-minded confidence he always wore when he thought he had done something clever. So, he said, smiling at the screen, I listed the spare room. I turned to look at him. What? He didn't hear the warning in my voice. Or maybe he did and thought charm would outrun it. The spare room, he repeated. Online. Short-term rental. Just weekends at first. Maybe a few weekday bookings if demand's good. We already got one for Friday. Already. That was the word that lodged in me. Not I had an idea, not what do you think, not even would you be open to. Already. I muted the television. You listed a room in my house without asking me? He laughed softly like I was focusing on the wrong part. Babe, don't make it sound dramatic. It's just the guest room. It sits empty most of the time. The guest room. The room at the end of the hall with the pale blue walls I painted myself the month I closed on the house. The room with the queen bed my father helped me haul up the stairs. The room where my older sister stayed when her marriage was falling apart and she needed 3 nights away from her life to cry somewhere safe. The room I kept ready because family came in bursts and sometimes people needed a place to land. He was right that it sat empty most days. He was wrong about everything else. I set the remote down very carefully. Take me through this slowly. His smile flickered, just for a second. Why are you doing that? Doing what? That voice, the one you use when you've already decided I'm wrong. I held his gaze. You said you listed my spare bedroom online. You said there's already a booking. So yes, Evan, I'd love for you to walk me through how we got from me owning a house to strangers apparently sleeping in it this Friday. He leaned back defensive now. Because we need the extra money. We. That almost made me laugh. I paid the mortgage. I paid the homeowner's insurance. I paid the taxes, the repairs, the termite inspection last spring, the plumber. When the upstairs sink backed up, the electrician when the porch light started flickering. Evan contributed to groceries, streaming subscriptions, utilities, shared household expenses. That had been the agreement from the day he moved in 7 months earlier. Clear, simple, adult. But when he said we, what he meant was something looser, more useful. I folded my arms. What money problem are we having? His expression hardened. That's not fair. No, I said quietly. What's unfair is finding out there's a confirmed booking in my house because my boyfriend decided my property was his solution. He tossed his phone onto the couch cushion between us. My work has been slow. You know that. He worked in events. Good months were good. Bad months came with a lot of pacing and optimism and phrases like, I'm just in a weird stretch right now. I had sympathy for that. I really did. I had even been covering more groceries lately without making a thing about it because relationships weren't supposed to be tally sheets. But sympathy had apparently mutated into access. So this is about your cash flow, I said. It's about us being smart. On whose account? He frowned. What? The listing, the payments, the profile, whose account is it under? He hesitated. That half second told me everything. Yours, I said, only because I already had one set up. I stared at him. He pushed forward quickly, words tripping over themselves now. Madeline, come on. It's temporary. The room is there. People do this all the time. Sophie made almost $2,000 over the holidays renting out her basement suite. My house doesn't have a basement suite. It's still usable space. It's my home. He threw up his hands. You're acting like I sold the place. No, I said. I'm acting like you put a price on access to it. That landed. I saw it in his face, the way his jaw tightened, the way he looked away for a moment. Then he tried the softer route. I wanted to help, he said. I wanted to show initiative. You've been stressed too. There was something almost insulting about that, not just because it was manipulative, but because it was lazy manipulation. He was offering me the flattering version of his motive now, the polished one, the one designed to make refusal sound ungrateful. I smiled, not because I was amused, because I suddenly understood that anger would help him. Anger would let him call me emotional, controlling, territorial. Calm would scare him more. That's very entrepreneurial, I said. His whole face changed. Relief flooded in so fast it was almost embarrassing to watch. Exactly, he said, pointing at me. That's what I'm saying. Thank you. You get it. I nodded once, like I did. Then I asked, what did you use for the photos? He blinked. What? The listing photos. Oh, just my phone. The room, the hallway, the bathroom. I made it look nice. The hallway. I pictured the narrow stretch between the guest room and linen closet, the wall lined with framed family photos. My mother at 50 in a red dress, my sister holding her newborn son, me in a graduation gown, my father grinning with a hand on my shoulder. Intimate little markers of a life. Not decorative, personal. I could actually feel something cold move through me then. You photographed inside my house, I said, and posted it publicly online. His patience snapped. Madeline, it's not like I uploaded our bank statements, it's a hallway. I stood up. He watched me, confused now, maybe sensing the shift too late. Where are you going? He asked. To make tea, I said. I went into the kitchen because I needed the physical distance. I filled the kettle and stood there with both hands on the counter, staring at the dark window over the sink. The worst part was not that he had done it. The worst part was how normal he thought it was. No guilt, no nervous confession, no embarrassed admission that he'd crossed a line. He'd told me the way someone reveals they finally bought the shelf they'd been meaning to install in the garage. I stayed in the kitchen until the kettle whistled. When I came back with my mug, he was scrolling again, relaxed, convinced the conversation had mostly gone his way. I sat down and asked, when is the first booking? This Friday, 2 nights. Nice couple from Ohio. He tried to smile again. See? Easy money. Easy money. Strangers in my house. Unknown liability. My address online. My private hallway displayed to anyone browsing in the area. And the money would go into his account because apparently my ownership had become a detail, not a boundary. I took a sip of tea and kept my voice even. I'm tired. We'll talk tomorrow. He squinted at me. You sure you're okay? No, I said, but I'm quiet. Don't confuse the two. For the first time that night, he looked unsettled. He went to bed around 11. I waited another 20 minutes, listening to the house settle into silence. Then I opened my laptop at the kitchen table and began pulling at every thread he'd hoped I wouldn't notice. By midnight, I had enough to make my stomach turn. My insurance policy had a clause about unapproved short-term rentals. Clear language, clear risk. If a paying guest got injured on the property without proper disclosure and adjusted coverage, claims could be denied. Not maybe. Could. The kind of word that sounds small until it ruins you. At 12:30, I found the HOA rules. Short-term rentals under 30 days were prohibited unless pre-approved in writing. I read that sentence 3 times. Then I found the penalties. Then I searched the listing. And there it was. A smiling headline. Cozy room. Quiet neighborhood. Close to downtown. My hallway in the 4th photo. My dresser, my guest bed, my towels. My life, cropped and marketed by a man who kept saying we while quietly meaning me. There were already 3 bookings. 3. I took screenshots of everything. The listing, the pricing, the scheduled stays, the photos, the payout setup. Then screenshots of the insurance clause. The HOA restriction. Every last thing. I organized them into a folder on my desktop with shaking fingers and a frighteningly clear head. By the time I finally closed the laptop, it was almost 2 in the morning. I didn't cry. I didn't wake him up. I just sat there in the dark kitchen, staring at the black screen, realizing something I should have understood sooner. This was never about a spare room. It was about the moment someone stopped seeing your boundaries as real because your life had become convenient to them. Monday morning, after Evan left for work, I started undoing what he had done. And by 4:15 that afternoon, my phone lit up with his first message. Why isn't the door code working? Then another. Madeline, the alarm is going off. What did you do? I looked at the screen for a long moment before picking up the call. I answered on the second ring. Hey, I said. His voice came sharp and breathless through the speaker. Why isn't the code working? I leaned back in my office chair and looked at the clock on my monitor. 4:17 p.m. Because I changed it. Silence. Then, you changed the code? Yes. The alarm is screaming, Madeline. I know. I also changed the alarm access. Another silence. Shorter this time, but hotter. You need to tell me what the hell is going on. I will, I said, when I get home. He exhaled hard enough that I could hear it crackle through the phone. I'm standing in the driveway. It's cold. Sit in your car. Turn the heat on. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Madeline, I hung up. The drive home felt strangely calm, not because I wasn't angry, because anger had already burned through and left something cleaner behind. Precision, maybe, or disappointment so complete it no longer needed theatrics. When I pulled into the driveway, Evan was in his car with the engine running, jaw set, both hands tight on the steering wheel. He didn't get out until I parked. Then he was already moving toward me by the time I reached the front walk. "What is this?" he demanded. I unlocked the front door with the new code, stepped inside, disarmed the alarm, and turned to face him in the entryway. "This," I said, "is me fixing what you did." He stared at me. "Are you insane?" "No. You locked me out of the house. I changed digital access to my property after discovering you listed part of it online for strangers in violation of my insurance policy and HOA rules." His eyes narrowed. "You canceled the bookings." "Yes." "All of them?" "Yes." His face changed, disbelief sliding into outrage. "Those people were confirmed, and now they're refunded." "You had no right to do that from my account." I laughed once, quietly, because that was the sentence he chose. Not "I'm sorry." Not "I didn't realize how serious this was." Not even I messed up. "You had no right." "I had every right," I said. "It was my address, my house, my liability." He took a step closer. "You humiliated me. You endangered me. I was trying to help. You were trying to profit." His head jerked back like I'd slapped him. "Wow." "No," I said. "Here's wow. If one of your guests had slipped on the porch steps or fallen in the shower, my coverage could have been denied. If the HOA had caught the listing before I reported it, I could have been fined. You photographed the inside of my home and put it online without asking me, Evan. Explain to me why you think any part of that is normal." He looked away, then back at me, switching tactics so quickly it was almost mechanical. "You're blowing this out of proportion." I folded my arms. "Am I?" "Yes, you are. It was one room. It was one boundary. You crossed it anyway." He scoffed and walked past me into the kitchen, the way people do when they want to look less cornered than they feel. I followed more slowly. He braced his hands against the counter and shook his head. "I can't believe you changed the codes before even talking to me." "I did talk to you, last night. You smiled through the whole conversation like you'd done me a favor. That's because I thought once you calmed down you'd see it made sense." I stared at him. He turned, saw my face, and seemed to realize too late how revealing that had been. "Calm down." As if my objection was mood. As if my consent was a phase he could wait out. "Say that again," I said softly. He frowned. "What?" "The part where my answer becomes valid only after it changes." His mouth opened, then shut. I nodded toward the hallway. "Also, you no longer have access to the garage keypad, the alarm app, or the smart lock. If you need entry while you're still living here, you ask me first." His whole body stiffened. "While I'm still living here?" There it was, the first flicker of fear. Not about what he'd done. About consequences. I met his eyes. "Don't start panicking. I haven't told you to leave. Yet. But I am telling you this does not happen again." He stared at me for a long second, then gave a short, bitter laugh. "So that's what this is, a power trip." "No," I said. "This is the moment you realized I'm not as easy to overrule as you thought." He slept in our bed that night. I took the couch. Not because he asked me to. Because I wanted distance and I didn't trust myself to lie next to him without hearing that awful little note of certainty in his voice again. "Once you calm down." Tuesday passed in a silence so thick it seemed to settle on the furniture. He went to work early. I left before he came back. We moved around each other like two people trapped in an elevator pretending the other one wasn't there. By Wednesday, he tried warmth. I came home to take out containers from my favorite Thai place, candles lit on the dining table. 2 plates set out with a care that might have been touching if it hadn't felt so strategic. He stood when I came in. "Can we please talk?" I set down my bag and looked at the table. "You already had dinner?" he asked. "No." "Then sit." I did, mostly because I wanted to hear what version of the story he was trying next. He served the noodles, poured water into my glass, and sat across from me with that composed, remorse-adjacent expression people wear when they've practiced sounding reasonable in the car. "I know you're upset," he began. I almost smiled. Not because it was funny, because of course that was his first sentence. "You're upset. Not I was wrong." He kept going. "And I know I should have talked to you first." There it was again. That almost apology with the guilt surgically removed. I set down my fork. "That isn't an apology." He blinked. "What?" "Saying you should have talked to me first is not the same as saying you were wrong to do it." He leaned back, irritated already. "Madeline, I'm trying here." "Then try honestly." He rubbed a hand over his jaw. "Fine, I was wrong not to ask." "Still not it." His eyes hardened. "You really need exact wording right now?" No, I said, I need you to actually understand what happened. He let out a slow breath through his nose, then spoke in a measured tone that made me think he believed patience itself should earn him points. Okay, I'm sorry I listed the room without your permission. I watched him. He added, but can we at least talk about whether the idea itself could still work? I laughed then. I couldn't help it. Not loudly, just once, in disbelief. He sat back offended. Wow, you really don't get it. I get that you shut it down before we discussed it. No, I said. You shut discussion down when you did it first. He shook his head. You always do this thing, where if something isn't your idea, you act like it's automatically reckless. That is not true. Isn't it? Because every time I try to bring something new in here, you have a reason it won't work. I stared at him. New in here? The coffee table, the garage shelving, the thermostat schedule. Evan, are you seriously comparing furniture to renting my spare room to strangers? I'm comparing the pattern. There it was. He genuinely believed the problem was not the action, but my refusal to validate it. I leaned forward. Then let's talk about patterns. Your work slows down, and instead of sitting with me and talking honestly about money, you decide to monetize my house. You use your account, so the payouts go to you. You put my hallway online without permission. Then when I stop it, you make yourself the victim because I changed the codes. That's the pattern I'm seeing. His nostrils flared. You think I was stealing from you? I think you were helping yourself to something that wasn't yours. His voice dropped. I live here. Yes, I said. You live here. That is not the same thing. He looked away, jaw working, then said more quietly, do you have any idea what it feels like to live in a place where none of it is yours? That landed harder than I expected, because unlike everything else he'd said, that felt true. For a second, I saw past the audacity and into the insecurity underneath it, the way he hesitated before inviting people over, the way he still called the living room your living room, sometimes when he was tired, the way he never quite settled his body in the house, as if some part of him still expected to be temporary. And because I loved him, or had, fully and without reservation, until this week, I softened. A little, I admitted. Something flickered in his eyes. Hope, maybe. But then he ruined it. So maybe you can understand why I'm tired of feeling like a guest, he said. Maybe I want to feel like I have some say. There it was again. Not vulnerability as honesty, vulnerability as leverage. I sat back. You get say in shared life things, I said. Groceries, furniture, paint colors, if we're both agreeing to repaint. Vacation plans, utility costs. You do not get unilateral authority over my deed, my insurance exposure, or who sleeps under my roof. He looked wounded, then angry, then wounded again. I stood up, and I'm done with this conversation. His voice sharpened. Because I'm right? No, I said. Because you're still arguing for access like it's love. I went upstairs before he could answer. Thursday afternoon, my phone rang while I was finishing paperwork at work. The caller ID showed Lena, his cousin. I had met her 3 times, maybe 4. Bright smile, too much perfume, the kind of woman who could extract a family secret in under 5 minutes while pretending to ask about your shoes. I almost didn't answer. Then I thought better of it and picked up. Hi, Lena. Her voice was sugar over static. Hey, Madeline. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. You're not. A tiny pause. I just heard you and Evan are going through something. Of course. I swiveled my chair away from the office floor and stared out the window. That depends on what you heard. She laughed nervously. Just that things are tense, that he feels really shut out. There it was. The passive construction of family diplomacy. Feels shut out. So much cleaner than listed someone else's property online. I kept my voice even. Lena, Evan put my spare bedroom on a short-term rental site without asking me. In my house, using my address. In violation of my insurance and HOA rules. I canceled the bookings. That's what happened. Silence. Long enough that I checked the screen to make sure the call hadn't dropped. Then, he didn't mention the rental part. I'm not surprised. Another pause, and when she spoke again, the brightness was gone. Okay, that's very different. Yes. She exhaled. I'm going to stay out of it. I think that's wise. After I hung up, I sat very still for a while. Not because Lena mattered much. She didn't. But because that call confirmed something ugly. He wasn't just minimizing what happened in his own head. He was retelling it in a form that made me sound cruel and him sound displaced. He was building a version of events he could live in. Friday night, the air in the house had that brittle, waiting feeling storms have before they break. We were in the living room, the television on low, both pretending to watch some home renovation show neither of us cared about. Then he muted it. "I talked to my mom," he said. Every nerve in me seemed to pull tight at once. I turned slowly. "About?" He didn't answer immediately, which made the answer worse when it came. "She thinks if we're serious, I should have some protection here." I stared at him. "What does that mean?" He swallowed. "Like some kind of formal stake." The room went very quiet. I could hear the refrigerator motor humming in the kitchen, a car passing outside, my own heartbeat, slow and deliberate, like it had decided to conserve itself for impact. "A formal stake," I repeated. He rushed in before I could speak again. "Not because I'm trying to take anything from you. That's not what I'm saying." "What are you saying?" "That if I'm living here and building a life with you, I shouldn't be in a position where you can just change some codes and remind me it's all yours whenever we fight." I looked at him for a long moment. It is one thing to cross a line impulsively. It is another to study the fallout and decide the real problem is that the line existed at all. "My mother," I said very carefully, "spent 20 years with a man who put everything in his name and made her beg to feel secure in her own home. I know exactly what financial vulnerability looks like, Evan. Do not stand there and try to borrow the language of protection while asking me to ignore reality." He flinched. "That's not fair." "No," I said. "What's unfair is pretending groceries and utility contributions create ownership in a house I bought years before you moved in." He stood up. "So that's it. No matter what I do, I'll always be temporary here." "That is not what I said." "It's what you mean." I stood too now, though more slowly. "What I mean is that trust is what makes people build futures together. And right now, you're not asking me for trust. You're asking me for leverage." His face went white with anger. "You think that little of me?" I didn't answer, because the truth was, until that exact second, I hadn't. He turned away, grabbed his keys from the side table, and headed toward the door. "Where are you going?" I asked. "To get air." The door shut hard behind him. Not slammed, just hard enough to say he wanted me to hear the force of it. I stood alone in the living room with the muted television flickering silent images across the walls, and something in me finally settled into place. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't stress. It wasn't one bad decision followed by clumsy defensiveness. It was a pattern made of small trespasses dressed as partnership. A room, a listing, a rewritten story, a mother consulted like counsel, a request for protection that looked suspiciously like claim. I turned off the television and sat in the dark for a long time. And somewhere between the first hour and the second, I realized I was no longer asking myself how to fix this. I was asking how much farther he was willing to go. Saturday morning, I woke up to a quiet house. Not the peaceful kind. The kind that feels like something has already shifted while you were asleep. Evan's side of the bed was cold. His shoes were gone from the entryway. His jacket hook was empty. There was a note on the kitchen counter. "Staying at my mom's for the weekend. We need to figure this out. I can't keep living like this." I read it twice. Then I set it down, poured myself coffee, and stood there staring at the steam rising from the mug like it might rearrange the last week into something that made sense. "We need to figure this out." It sounded collaborative. It sounded reasonable. It sounded like we were two people facing a shared problem. But that wasn't what this was anymore. This was me standing in a house I had built stability into, piece by piece, realizing that the person I trusted inside it had started treating it like something negotiable. I carried my coffee out to the porch. The air was sharp enough to bite. January didn't soften anything. It just made edges clearer. And sitting there, wrapped in a sweater that still smelled faintly like his cologne, I reached a conclusion I couldn't unreach. This wasn't going to get smaller. It was going to escalate. The listing had been step 1. The reframing had been step 2. The protection conversation, his mother's voice layered underneath his, had been step 3. There would be a step 4. There was always a step 4 with people who mistook access for ownership. I went back inside, set the mug in the sink, and walked down the hall to the guest room. His things had slowly started bleeding into that space over the past few months. Extra clothes, storage bins, a gym bag he said he'd put away later and never did. Little quiet expansions like roots testing the soil. I opened the closet and stared at it for a long moment. Then I grabbed a box. By noon, there were 3. By 2 o'clock, there were 6. I wasn't throwing anything away. I wasn't being dramatic. I was organizing, containing, drawing a line in physical space the way I had already drawn one in my head. When I finished, everything that was his and not part of the shared daily living sat neatly packed in the guest room, stacked against the wall like evidence. I stood in the doorway, breathing a little harder than I expected. Not from the work, from the finality. Because once you start packing someone's things, even if they don't know it yet, Some part of you has already decided they're leaving. He came back Sunday evening. I heard his car before I saw him. The low engine hum, the door closing, the familiar rhythm of his footsteps on the walkway. I was at the kitchen table when he walked in. He didn't say hello. His eyes went straight past me, down the hallway, landing on the guest room door that I had left open on purpose. He froze. Then he walked toward it slowly, like approaching something that might change if he moved too fast. "What is this?" he asked, his voice tight. I didn't get up. "I packed the things you had in there," I said. He turned to look at me. "Why?" I met his eyes. "I think you should move out." The words landed between us, heavy and clean. For a second, he didn't react at all. Then he let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "You're serious?" "Yes. This is because of the Airbnb thing. This is because of all of it." He took a step toward me. "You're ending a relationship over one mistake." "No," I said. "I'm ending it over a pattern you keep calling a misunderstanding." His jaw clenched. "So that's it? 7 months? Gone? Because I tried to help and you didn't like how I did it?" 7 months, I repeated quietly, where I thought we were building something based on respect. And then you showed me what you actually believe you're entitled to. He shook his head, pacing now. "You're twisting this." "I'm clarifying it." "You didn't even try to work through it." "I did," I said. "I listened. I explained. I gave you space to understand why this was a problem. And instead of meeting me there, you doubled down. You involved your family. You reframed what happened. You asked for ownership, like the issue was me having boundaries at all." He stopped pacing. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then something in him shifted. Not anger, not defensiveness, something quieter. He pulled out a chair and sat across from me. And when he spoke again, his voice was calm. "I knew this was coming," he said. "That caught me off guard." "Then why push it?" I asked. He looked at the table instead of at me. "Because I'm tired," he said. "I'm tired of feeling like I'm living in someone else's life." I didn't interrupt. "I come home and everything is already decided," he continued. "Where things go, how things work, what's allowed, it's all yours. And I just fit into it." I let that sit for a second. Because that part, the feeling behind the behavior, that part I could understand. But understanding something doesn't mean accepting what it turns into. "I hear that," I said finally. He looked up, surprised. "And I should have done more to make you feel like you belonged here," I added. His expression softened, just a little. "But that's not what this was," I continued. It faded. Listing my house online without telling me isn't about belonging. Asking for a legal stake after 7 months isn't about security. Those are control moves, Evan, and you're wrapping them in vulnerability so they sound reasonable. His eyes hardened again. "So now I'm manipulative." "I think you're mixing up wanting something with being entitled to it." He leaned back, exhaling slowly. "So what now?" "I'll give you 2 weeks," I said. "That's reasonable. I won't rush you. But I think you should find somewhere else to live." He studied me for a long time, looking for hesitation, for doubt, for anything he could use to reopen the conversation. He didn't find it. Finally, he nodded once. "Fine," he said. "I'll be out by the end of the month." No yelling, no slammed doors, just that quiet acceptance that somehow felt heavier than either of those things. He stood up and walked to the bedroom, closing the door behind him without another word. I sat there for a long time after he was gone, staring at the same spot on the table where his hands had been, thinking about how strange it was that the end of something can feel so calm when the middle of it was so loud. I thought that was the end. It wasn't. Tuesday afternoon, I got a certified letter, my name typed neatly across the front, a return address from a legal aid office. My stomach dropped before I even opened it. Inside was a formal notice. Language about residency, contributions, occupancy, statements that he had established rights by living in the home for several months and contributing financially, that I could not remove him without proper legal notice. I read it once, then again, each sentence colder than the last. By the third time, I wasn't angry. I was impressed, not in a good way. In the way you feel when you realize someone has been thinking several steps ahead while you were still trying to decide if you were arguing or fixing something. I set the paper down on the table, looked around the house, my house, and understood something with absolute clarity. We had stopped being a couple days ago. I just hadn't realized we'd become opponents. I didn't call him right away. I sat there with the letter in front of me, reading the same lines over and over until the words stopped sounding like language and started sounding like strategy. Established residency, financial contribution, improper removal. It was clinical, detached, almost polite. And that was what made it worse. Because this wasn't anger anymore. This was planning. I called Daniel. We'd gone to college together. He'd gone on to practice real estate law. We weren't close in the day-to-day sense, but he was one of those people you kept in your life because when things got complicated, he made them simple. He picked up on the third ring. Madeline? Hey, I said, do you have 30 minutes? For you? Yeah, what's going on? I looked down at the letter again. My boyfriend is trying to turn into my tenant. There was a pause. Then, okay, that sounds like a sentence that comes with context. I gave it to him. Not every emotional detail, just the facts, the timeline, the move-in, the contributions, the Airbnb listing, the argument, the request for him to leave, the letter. When I finished, he let out a low whistle. All right, he said, here's the reality. I braced myself. In a lot of states, if someone lives somewhere for more than 30 days and receives mail there, they can argue residency, even without a lease. I closed my eyes. You're kidding. I wish I was. So he can just stay? Not indefinitely, Daniel said. But you can't just throw him out either. You have to follow proper notice procedures. Written notice. Specific time frame. If he refuses to leave after that, then it becomes a formal eviction. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. How long? If it escalates, 30 to 45 days, depending on how hard he pushes. I laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. He's already pushing. Yeah, Daniel said. I figured. I ran a hand over my face. I gave him 2 weeks verbally. Good instinct, he said. Now formalize it. Put it in writing. Date it. Keep a copy. Give him one. If he leaves within that window, you're done. If he doesn't, then we deal with the next step. We. That word felt very different coming from Daniel. Not entitlement. Support. Okay, I said quietly. I can do that. And Madeline? Yeah? Stop thinking of this like a breakup. It's a property situation now. Keep everything documented. Keep everything calm. Don't give him anything he can use against you. I looked at the letter again. Too late for that, but not too late to stop it from getting worse. Got it, I said. That evening, I typed up the notice. Clear, direct, professional. 17 days to vacate. More than the minimum required. I printed 2 copies. Signed both. Dated them. Then I walked into the living room where Evan was sitting, scrolling his phone like nothing had changed. Hey, I said. He looked up. Hey. I held out the paper. What's that? Formal notice? His expression didn't change immediately. Then it did. Slowly. He took the paper, scanned it, and let out a small, almost amused breath. My legal advisor said I can stay up to 45 days. Of course he did. I nodded once. He told you that you can fight it. That's different from having a right to stay. He looked up at me, eyes sharp now. You'd actually go through with that? Evict me? I didn't hesitate. Yes. Something flickered in his face. Not guilt. Not regret. Recognition. You'd treat me like a stranger, he said. I met his gaze. You tried to rent my house to strangers. The silence that followed was heavy. Not explosive. Just final. He looked back down at the paper, then folded it once, neatly, and set it on the table beside him. Okay, he said. No argument. No raised voice. Just that same calm again. And for the first time, it unsettled me more than anything else had. The next morning, his mother called. I almost didn't answer. Then I thought about Daniel's voice in my head. Keep everything calm. So I picked up. Hello? You should be ashamed of yourself. No greeting. No hesitation. Just accusation. I leaned against the kitchen counter. Good morning to you, too. You're throwing him out in the middle of winter, she continued, after everything he's given you. I let a beat pass. He has options, I said. He can stay with you. He can go back to his previous apartment. I've given him more than 2 weeks' notice. I'm following the law. She scoffed. You think hiding behind paperwork makes you right? I think following the law keeps things clear. He loved you. I know. And this is how you repay that? I stared out the window, at the driveway, at the place where his car had been parked for months. This isn't about repayment, I said. This is about boundaries. She laughed, sharp and dismissive. You think you're so clever. Your codes, your notices, your little rules. I didn't respond to that, because there was nothing to say. After a moment, she added, colder now. You're going to regret this. Maybe, but not in the way she meant. I don't think so, I said. And then I hung up. The next 12 days were strange. Not loud. Not chaotic. Just stretched thin. He moved into the guest room. I stayed in the master. We stopped existing in the same spaces at the same times. If I was in the kitchen, he wasn't. If he was in the living room, I stayed upstairs. We spoke when necessary. Logistics only. No emotion. No attempts to fix anything. It felt less like a breakup and more like a waiting period. Like the house itself was holding its breath. He packed slowly. Deliberately. Not dragging it out exactly. But not rushing either. And I let him. I didn't hover. Didn't comment. Didn't push. I had drawn the line. Now I just had to hold it. The last Saturday came quietly. No announcement. No countdown. Just the sound of drawers opening and closing. Boxes being taped. Footsteps moving back and forth. His mother's SUV pulled into the driveway mid-morning. I watched from the window for a moment before stepping outside. Not to supervise. Just to be there. He was carrying a box when he saw me. Paused. Then kept walking. I helped. Not because I had to. Because it felt like the right way to end something that, despite everything, had once been real. We didn't talk much. Just small, functional exchanges. Careful with that. That one's heavier. Do you want this in your car or hers? 3 trips. That's what it took. On the last one, he stood in the driveway for a second longer than necessary. His mother sat in the driver's seat, engine running, eyes fixed straight ahead like she refused to acknowledge me. He looked at me, and for the first time in days, there was no strategy in his expression. Just something quieter. I really did love you, he said. I believed him. I know, I said. I loved you too. He swallowed. Then what broke it? I held his gaze and told him the truth. You saw something that was mine, I said, and decided it was ours. And when I disagreed, you kept pushing until you ran out of ways to push. He didn't argue, didn't defend himself, just nodded once, then turned, got into the car, and closed the door. The SUV pulled away, and just like that, he was gone. I stood in the driveway for a while after, long enough for the silence to settle. Then I went back inside, closed the door, reset the alarm. A new code, one only I knew. I walked down the hallway to the guest room. The door was open. The room was empty. The bed stripped, the closet bare, carpet showing faint lines where boxes had sat. I stepped inside slowly, ran my hand along the dresser, then turned and walked back out. That night, I sat on the couch. The house was quiet again. Not tense, not waiting, just quiet. My quiet. A week later, he texted me. Just one message. I still think we could have worked it out if you'd been willing to compromise. I read it, thought about it, then typed back. Compromise requires 2 people talking before something happens. You skipped that part. I hit send. He didn't reply. I didn't expect him to. The next Saturday, my older brother came to visit. He walked in, dropped his bag by the door, and looked around. House looks good, he said. I smiled faintly. Thanks. He nodded toward the hallway. Guest room still open? Always. He grinned. Good. I brought bourbon. We sat on the back porch that night. Cold air. 2 glasses. No explanations needed. At one point, he glanced at me and said, "You okay?" I thought about it. About the week. About the quiet. About everything that had almost been taken from me without me even realizing it was being negotiated. Then I nodded. Yeah, I said, I am. And for the first time since that Sunday night on the couch, I actually meant it.